Now you do what they told you. 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 Now you do what they told you.
Hey, thank you so much for joining, everyone. I wanted to take a few moments to discuss Rage Against the Machine, the band, and the song Killing in the Name of, ultimately a protest against police brutality and racism. My name is Michael Gifford. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we get started, I want to do just a brief introduction on the band themselves. Rage Against the Machine was formed in 1991 and was ultimately dubbed a punk pop, funk bop rock band out of Los Angeles. Varying types of music that had ultimately been formed with the band. They've been dubbed rap metal, rap rock, funk metal, alternative metal, amongst many others. The founding members, Zach De La Rocha, Tom Morello, Tim Hummerford, and Bradley Wilk, were ultimately the original members of the band and had been without the band through its inception all the way till its recent completion. The importance of the song Killing in the Name of in the context of protest music, and we'll discuss briefly widely why this is recognized as a pretty significant protest anthem and how it directly addresses police brutality and institutional racism. Before we do get started and go any further, we do want to provide a bit of historical context, and that is that in March of 1991, there was an incident with Rodney King. He was brutally beaten by police officers of the Los Angeles Police Department. And ultimately, there was a wide public reaction to this, and there was significant media coverage. Following that event, those members of the Los Angeles Police Department were ultimately acquitted in 1992. Shortly after their acquittal, there was massive uproar and a significant outcry from the community that ultimately staged riots that were all in significant parts of Los Angeles. Those riots lasted for 6 days, and as a result, there were 63 deaths and over 2,300 individuals were injured. The impact in public perception on this was an increased heightened awareness of police brutality and really highlighting a lot of the systemic racism within law enforcement. More so about this song, which is ultimately why we're here, is the release date of this particular track was in November of 1992, and its initial release was widespread criticism of both positive and negative for the song. It ultimately had chart performances that were greatly significant in the UK. It remained a #1 song for multiple weeks. The key themes and messages within this specific song, as mentioned, focuses highly on police brutality and institutional racism. And as well, there are other messages subliminally about rebellion and resistance. And I played a little bit of a brief clip, the excerpt of the song at the beginning here, but ultimately didn't play the full version. You can certainly go out and seek that out. But as we dive into the lyrical analysis and we break down the significant lyrics, so some of those who work forces are some of those that burn crosses, end quote, ultimately discussing directly the individuals of the Los Angeles Police Department who ultimately wore a cross or wore worked for the force, but burned crosses. And easily the "fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," very much a simple, straight message of rebellion. There was connections between the Los Angeles Police Department and the Ku Klux Klan. There's historical evidence of police involvement within KKK associations, and truly the impact on listeners and perception of law enforcement had truly changed at that point. Fully the critique of the institutionalized racism and of the military industrial complex is where a lot of the music style and influence truly comes from within Rage Against the Machine's music. And we look a little bit further at that. A depiction of their musical styles is, as mentioned earlier, a fusion of punk, hip hop, thrash, among others. It's been known as rap metal, alternative metal, funk. A very aggressive and energetic sound. Ultimately, how that aggressive music helps to enhance the protest message. Truly, the intensity of the music amplifies the urgency of the lyrics, and using things like heavy guitar riffs that are somewhat unconventional in terms of music that would be modern day. The influence on later protest musics was actually truly inspiring. It's inspiring to future generations, and it's a politically charged musicians, and that ultimately derive a lot of their belief from Rage Against the Machine as a band. As we look a little further, the public and critical perception initially, as mentioned, had positive and negative both in the beginning. The media reviews and public opinions for the song, obviously, as a means of rebellion and as a means to highlight institutional racism, was received with great support. There were multiple controversies and attempts to ultimately censor the band. In fact, I believe that there was an issue where in mainstream media, there was the British Broadcasting Corporation had accidentally played the uncensored version over the airways, causing great backlash from daily listeners over the regular radio. Some of the notable performance and moments, though, ultimately in 2009, there was a campaign to make the song "Killing in the Name of" the number one song the week of Christmas. Ultimately, it would have usurped or knocked off the X Factor award winner who had previously held that spot for 5 years running. And there was a massive campaign to get behind people to ultimately buy the song in a digital format or on CD disc to support the music and really bring the song higher up in the charts as far as global ratings. There's some great critical acclaim, recognized as one of the greatest songs in multiple lists. There's influence on other artists and other bands as well. And as we look at that, there are broader themes within Rage Against the Machine's music. This message is echoed in multiple other albums and songs throughout the Rage Against the Machine archive. If we look at their catalog, Bulls on Parade, Guerrilla Radio, and Testify are just a few to name some of the essentials. The themes of anti-capitalism, government oppression, and cultural imperialism are essentially at the forefront. There's a lot of critique of corporate America and economic inequality, a lot of opposition to U.S. foreign policies and military actions and how the U.S. conducts itself internationally. There's a real importance of Rage Against the Machine in the landscape of political music, the role of reviving protest music in the 1990s, and as well as to contributions on the social and political discourse. Modern relevance, the discussion of the song's relevance is ultimately contemporary in social musics. You have a lot of specific movements and individual aspects that could be related specifically to this. Black Lives Matter is one anti-protest and police brutality protests, and the song used in modern context is comparison to incidents of lots of police brutality with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. It's certainly a high profile issue and is ongoing in terms of systemic racism within law enforcement. There's a lasting impact in the song itself, "Killing in the Name of," and ultimately a continued resonance with new generations. And here, as we hit the conclusion, we have some citations that we can provide here for everyone.